Right. Good morning, everyone. My name's Joe Broon, and welcome to the Housing Digital Micro Conference on enhancing human potential with AI, a new era for housing associations. My name's Joe Broon. I'm the Managing Director of Housing Digital, and I'm today's host of this online event. We're looking at AI and how transformative that is right across society at the moment, and housing being no exception. In today's environment of tight budgets, rising customer expectations, and increasing regulatory complexity, housing associations must achieve more with less. This event will explore how artificial intelligence, data, and automation are becoming essential tools to streamline operations, support tenants, and scale services without proportionally increasing headcounts. We'll showcase real-world examples of how housing providers are using AI to cleanse data, predict trends, and reduce manual workflows. It's my honor to represent to introduce, should I say, today's first keynote, which is Oliver Sinclair. Oliver is the Chief Technology Officer at Crimson, and Oliver will be talking about how AI is a digital colleague and how to scale housing services without scaling headcounts. Oliver, you are free to take over the screen with your presentation.
Okay, yes. So thanks very much for the introduction. I know we're going to whiz through this quite quickly. Thank you for the intro. I'm Oliver Sinclair, the Chief Technical Officer for Crimson. Just very quickly, Crimson, we are a Microsoft solution partner. We deal with AI transformation within the housing sector. We really focus on productivity, from simple productivity using M365 Copilot in the Office suite or the applications, as well as driving efficiency through the Copilot Studio, creating custom agents for industry aligned productivity, as well as creating agents with full autonomy using AI Foundry. So we've been in the housing sector for quite a number of years. Our history is with business applications using Dynamics 365, so customer service, sales, customer insights, that sort of thing. We are then taking that foundation, we're pushing into AI transformation for housing. So what I want to talk to you guys today is really how do we navigate to the frontier firm, and how can AI really be a digital colleague in social housing. So if we think about where Microsoft is positioning this, they talk around frontier firms, and they talk around how can we embed AI into the ways in which we do our everyday work. Now, it's an interesting scenario where it seems as though we've got really three phases of how we're seeing this happening. The first phase is really with a human as an assistant. So we've all seen things like ChatGPT, or within the Microsoft stack M365 Copilot, which is a really powerful, very intelligent tool that allows you to do content summarization, a lot of generation of information from your organization, and it becomes an assistant. Where it really starts to become more of a digital colleague is really when we get into that phase 2 area, where it's kind of human agent teams, where we'll have agents taking on elements of a task to get to a single outcome. So really things like inbox triaging, or case summarization, or automating some tenant communication, or management reports. So we are looking at where organizations really start to go into that second phase. Now, the third phase, I'll be open with you guys. I think at the moment that is still a bit of quite a way away, where we actually have full autonomy of agents, where they have an understanding of an outcome. So and actually just being led by humans. But we are getting there. And don't get me wrong, they're not clear-cut phases of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. There's going to be a grey boundary between those. But really what we're seeing out in the marketplace now and what we're doing with our customers very much sits at that phase 2 level, where you have a human, or what I like to classify as an expert in the loop. The expert is still doing things, but you're also supported by very powerful agents that can handle some of that work, and you're working as a team. So that really is the digital colleague aspect of this. Where we're seeing this the most, certainly the first thing to talk about is data. So we've seen a lot of progression, and don't get me wrong, this isn't new. Data cleansing and data quality. If you ask any of your DBAs that work for your organizations, they'll be pleasantly surprised, pleasantly happy that we're still talking about data. Data is the foundational element of this. The garbage in, garbage out quote that we all see. It's just as relevant today as it has ever been. But if you're looking to try and get into where we have AI embedded in your organization, you do have to start with the understanding of your data and how you can actually do that. What's great is we've seen a massive advancement in terms of the tools and technologies that organizations are using to actually assist in this. One of our technology sets, Fabric. So Microsoft Fabric is a data platform that is really, really useful to actually be able to rather than having data being sent from other places and creating brand new data warehouses, you can actually cleanse that data and actually present that as more of an analytics type platform, which means that you can still have your back-end systems still controlling and marshalling what they need to marshal, but you have a central view of your data. And AI, in terms of merging those databases, matching and cleaning records and fixing those anomalies and fixing them at source, is something that Fabric, the Azure Data Factory, and some of the other elements are doing very, very well. Once we've got that data in the right place, then what are those agents that people are using? So one of the ones that we have released into production is around inbox triage and routing. So we have utilized, again, within the Power Platform, we've utilized Power Automate and AI Builder, which is a technology set that sits on top, that actually handles information coming in from emails or other channels. This one is specifically around emails. And one of the really interesting parts is to be able to understand the context of that email, to categorize it, do some sentiment analysis on that, and be able to route it to the right team, department, queue. It is really, really interesting. It saves a lot of time and a lot of responsiveness when it comes to our customers. So again, really, really interesting part around inbox and triaging and routing that to the right person. The other side we have seen, which is around case summarization. So when that email has come through, what are we actually doing to summarize that? Again, the context is really important here. So yes, you've got the context from the customer coming in, but you would have data that sits, now that you've got a good data platform, you've got data that sits that can give you an understanding of, okay, what's happening with that case. You can pre-populate some other information that would be useful for an agent to understand. So that would be, the location of that customer, any current issues or previous issues they've had, past cases, the sentiment analysis of that, but also aligning to some of the raw data of, say, for example, if it was a complaint or a responsive repair, then you would have access to information that agent would be able to summarize for you. So the idea of this is to have less staff time at triaging and analyzing these cases, and it's actually more doing the proactive responding or actually the problem solving, which again, keeping that human expert in the loop. One of the other areas we have seen is actually a real advancement in terms of management reporting and insights. So again, on Microsoft World, Customer Insights is a really fantastic platform that we've seen a lot of advancements coming through. But it's really looking at how anybody from a financial analyst, the finance team, the rent support officers, these people that are trying to look and understand trends and patterns. You can start to ask in natural language about the data and utilizing generative AI to actually produce the right reports for you that is in the context of that ask. So rather than having to have a long suite or potentially a long time waiting for your report writers to write the specific reports that you need, you actually can start to interrogate that information using natural language and actually find the information or find that proactive information a lot quicker. So we start to see in all different areas where generative AI and agents act as that colleague. All of this, all of these jobs, these tasks are done by humans now, but it's finding out those high impact areas where customers could actually benefit from that as well. The interesting part to all of this is all of those examples that I kind of taken you through there. There is some governance that has to be applied to that, but there's also a bit of a tactic of how you should be approaching this. And I've kind of summarized it really briefly in two different areas. The first one is, well, the question is, well, yes, this is great. We've got all this technology, we've got this access to the AI, but where is this all kind of plumbed together? How are we going to do this? And our approach has always been that you meet people where they work. So Microsoft are on this message as well. So if you look at M365 Copilot, even the chat area is the UI for AI. And what we're looking to do is you can actually have these tools integrated with your backend systems, but it's actually meeting people where they work. So you may not have to have to jump into M365 Copilot. You can have the agent working with you in Outlook. You could have them working with you within Power BI for your reports. Or yes, you can have them working in M365 Copilot or surfaced within Teams. And the idea behind this is that there's enough power and connectivity with these agents these days that actually it's more important around the culture and the adoption of these agents to meet the productivity where your people are actually working. And the perfect situation would be having autonomous agents that would actually support people doing their job effortlessly. So it's they may not even realize, and certainly for your tenants and the tenant satisfaction, they may not even realize that some of what they're asking for or some of their requests has been met by AI. They don't need to be presented with a bot every time. It could very well be that AI is in the background and is that sort of sticking glue about increasing the efficacy of your processes. The other part to this is this governance and guidance split into three ways. We do have to think about data security, privacy, role-based access with these agents. They will have personas, they will have tolerance levels, but we do need to make sure that we are GDPR compliant. There is also a new ISO accreditation, ISO 42001, which is coming on in leaps and bounds, which is making sure that we are governing and using responsible AI in the right way. Which takes me to the second point in terms of ethics and fairness. Just because you can do something with AI, the question always is, should we? So making sure that we are not putting in unconsciously, but putting in bias or making quite a critical process completely autonomous. You will still have human oversight, or what I like to call expert oversight in some of these areas. And then the final one is around transparency and compliance. So I've talked about regulatory compliance, but transparency is really, really key. And with the right tools and with the right way of building these elements, you should be able to have full transparency in terms of the steps that these agents have been taken, an audit trail of exactly what's happened, the rationale of why those agents have selected to do certain things, and what they have produced. And this is really critical and quite important in making sure that it's governed in the right way. So the idea behind this would be that in the future, you have your housing officer, rather than spending a lot of time writing reports entering information into your CRM systems and reading through status reports and emails before their day. They'll actually get that summarized, get that part automated, so they're out and about actually doing the human side of the housing officer role, and building up the relationships with tenants and building up the good use of what they do. Same principle with your asset management team. If you are can convert those into more of a proactive employees in terms of what they are actually doing. You're getting IoT, you're getting AI to be able to understand and actually start to proactively work on asset management. So scheduling, identifying of potential issues in the future is going to be something that they're really going to benefit from. And again, finance director as well. It's being able to have those reports to be able to report on natural language and be able to be more proactive in terms of what they're doing. So really, what we're trying to say is when we're looking at the way in which we can benefit from AI, it's handling those routine tasks. It's automating the reports, predictive maintenance, and smart assistance in its light. So that's really where we're trying to get to with this phase of AI. So that's a presentation from me. Obviously, the floor's open to questions or to the next presenter. That's all needed for today. So thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Thank you. Great presentation. Interesting stuff. Have we got some questions for Ollie, please?
Hi, Ollie. It's Mark Cantrell, editor of Housing Digital. I don't know if this is a question for you, for all of our speakers, or for none of us at all for our purposes here today. But I'm listening to you speaking about, what these AI systems can do. I've also got in the back of my head a lot of things that are going on in the world right now how this might impact the infrastructure for this technology. So I'm reading about, the Strait of Hormuz being closed and how this can have knock-on effects for chip manufacture. I've been reading about how the vast growth in investment for the data centers is impacting the production of GPUs and even RAM memory. And I'm also reading that in some places in the States are talking about moratoriums on building new data centers. So is this something that's going to impact what the sector's trying to achieve here with AI technology? Is there any blowback or hurdles from this that the sector might need to at least keep bubbling away at the back of the mind, if not something to immediately consider?
Yeah, it's a really, really insightful question. Thank you. I think, you do have to be conscious and aware around any dependencies in any of the sort of the strategic approach to your organization. So yes, if you are on, if you're looking at the frontier firm being a fantastic way of being able to find those operational efficiencies and increase your efficacy with your tenants and the processes that you're doing, you do have to consider greater impacts. What I would say is I think there's quite a lot of resilience in the marketplace in terms of things like the chip manufacturing and those sort of areas. When it comes to housing specifically, I think there are a number of initiatives or a number of strategies that kind of can protect you from doing that. The one element I would suggest is looking at your high impact areas where AI would be able to benefit you the most, but having a look at that, being very careful with the technology set that you're going to be using to actually do that. Now, not to say that the online and Microsoft Dynamics and Copilot Studio are the be all and end all, but you then are supported obviously by quite a big powerhouse in terms of Microsoft for supporting that going forward. They've got data centers all around the world, which and have quite a lot of resources. But there are other ways in which you can start to protect yourself. One of the interesting parts that we've seen recently is what people are calling edge AI. Now, if you guys remember, about 10 years ago when we were talking about edge computing, so cloud computing and what happens on the edge, we've also got edge AI as well. So although that probably has a higher demand on maybe the core manufacturing, chip manufacturing, but it does reduce your dependency on maybe some of the heavy lifting areas of which you're pushing out into your data centers and having the consumption element into data centers. You could push out certain language models. There can be small language models can do certain things, can be done on device. So it could be on your laptop, it could be within the actual device itself, and then suggesting or selecting the right technology set that matches what you want to do. We've already seen that for a different scenario. We've seen that where we're using edge AI because of connectivity issues around the remoteness of some of the operations that we're doing, and actually choosing to be able to flip between an on-premise, an on-device AI model to be able to do some of the productivity before switching out to an online model because of connectivity. But it's the same principle here. You're reducing your dependency on some of those areas. But hopefully, smarter people than me are looking at this and also worrying about this, because we live in the real world, and there'll be big consequences for things like the Strait of Hormuz. So, good question. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Question from David Loudon, who's a partner at Triple Value Impact. Dave asks, are you seeing landlords developing specific AI strategies?
Funnily enough, we're seeing two core strategies that seem to be coming out, and if any of us on the Housing Innovation Conference a couple of months ago, I did talk a little bit about this. We're seeing two levels of strategy. We're seeing strategies for incremental AI and strategies for transformation AI. So some people are sat there going, I need to get immediate efficiency gains in the business processes that I'm doing today. So I'm sprinkling in AI to immediately increase the efficacy of the current processes we have. The other ones are the kind of the deep thinkers that sit there and go, well, actually, I'm going to invest in really kind of ripping up some of my high impact areas and having AI embedded and thinking AI first, and then making sort of AI an assumed embedded part of what we do. And what we tend to see is people kind of want to find the quick efficiencies with incremental AI, but have one eye on those transformational AI initiatives that will maximize the efficacy of what they're doing. It's harder to do the transformational AI, hence why everybody seems to sort of have the two versions of that, which we talked to them about. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yeah, I've got a thumbs up from David. Next question we've got on the chat is from Adnan Khan, who's the head of data analytics and data science at Notting Hill Genesis. Adnan says, great presentation, thank you. How will residents be involved in this, and what opportunity will they have to provide input? If some residents do not consent to their data being used, what is the proposed approach? Will their data be excluded and a separate training subset created, or is there another opt-out mechanism?
Yeah, really good question. Crikey. Yeah, so we have thought about this, and I think it goes back to that second to last slide deck that I had, which was around the governance side of things and the transparency. Transparency is absolutely critical to making sure that that you are sharing how you're utilizing your customers' data, and that there is consent. I think it's early days in terms of having, for example, autonomous agents that are communicating without a human in the loop directly with your tenants, with your customers, without anybody sort of insights or human in there. I think it is a really tricky situation. I think it's a lot of communication, a lot of publication, but also really maximizing the benefits of why a certain organization would be using AI, what they're using it for, but it's the why. Why are we doing that? It's going to help you. It's going to benefit you. It's going to benefit the situation. In terms of people opting out to that, it could be quite tricky depending upon how you want to embed your AI. But at the same time, I think we have to be realistic. The vast majority of what we do every day probably already has some elements of AI or generative AI in there, from anything from choosing which Netflix program you want to watch to your emails. So I think it is all about transparency and making sure, certainly when it comes to DPIA and GDPR, you've got to make sure that there is the communication there, and there is the facility for people to, freedom of information, for example, or the right to forget. Those sort of functions will need to be a part of what you're trying to do.
Excellent. Another question that we've got from Tim Watton, who's the Green Funding Manager at Live West. Lots of people have demonstrated that AI can present erroneous information as fact, hallucinating. I wonder if you have any comment on trust, reliability, and accuracy, or even bias within different AI models.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, we do. We absolutely do. It's really funny. A fair few years ago, I'd say about a year and a half ago, I was having a good conversation with one of the CIOs for a housing association when we started talking about how generative AI does hallucinate. The minimizing the hallucination, and let's not forget, the large language models we're using today are going to be the worst language models we use. They're only going to increase in efficacy. They're only going to increase in quality, but it also depends on the data, the organization data that you're giving it to. So back to my first slide of those examples, data quality is absolutely critical to minimize the elements of hallucinations. One of the early ways of mitigating against hallucinations was actually using multiple language models. So you would actually generate content from one language model and ask another language model to critique that, to identify if it is hallucinating or if it is producing erroneous results. We tend to see that quite a lot when we're looking at our complex AI using AI Foundry, which is a technology set, again, by Microsoft, where you are far more in control of the lower level details of your agents. It's one of those really big challenges around non-deterministic systems in general, that, again, we're not in the static workflow world where it's data in, calculation, data out. You can test for that, you can guarantee that because it's consistent and you've got the results. Non-deterministic systems by nature are non-deterministic, so there's a different approach to testing and there's a different approach to how we do that. Some of the people actually we've stolen from some of our networking guys around some of the methodologies of how we make our agents resilient. So we use red teaming and we use chaos engineering to be able to come up with a theory of how to prove the resilience of the agents. And then rather than saying it's never going to fail, it's on a scale of resilience, and making sure that there are stops and checks and balances in there. The expert / people say human in the loop, I always say expert in the loop. The expert in the loop is your catch. Anything that you're generating, anything autonomously, there has to be a way in which you can govern that. Whether that's retrospectively for the higher level autonomous agents, there is still an audit trail of what's been done and why. So you can start to look at how you can keep your agents resilient. But chaos engineering and red teaming is a phenomenal way of utilizing a theory to make sure your agents are resilient to stop this hallucination.
Okay, Ali, I'm just trying to establish whether you're answering some of the questions that are coming up in the chat in what you've already said. I've got a question from Warren Bowes. I'm not got Warren on the guest list. I'm not sure where Warren's from, but Warren asks, what should resourcing look like in our teams if we make use of AI agents? Should we have dedicated AI specialists to manage things like governance / aligning AI with our policies as they are updated, building edge AI, etc.?
Yeah, again, good thought process. My default answer would be partner with the right organization that can help you out identifying specifically what's needed for your organization. I think you do need to think about governance. I think where we are at the moment, certainly from an IT perspective, we're seeing a huge efficiency saving in things like GitHub Copilot, Claude Code, etc., where we're actually spending less time generating the legacy applications that we build today. I think you would be able to utilize some of those really smart engineers to be able to look at more of the AI engineering side. But I think there needs to be, from a business perspective, we've seen really successful in terms of adopting to an ethics board. So having an AI ethics board that actually takes the business direction to control that. When it comes to the AI function or the specific building of the function, depending upon your organization, if you are a larger organization that has your own IT team, I think you do need to start to upskill and look at AI engineering, prompt engineering, or being able to sort of come up with the right suite of engineers that can factor for that, or have a hybrid model where you partner with your experts. So get your partners in there to be able to find the gaps in which your team has and complement your team going forward, as you can then start to control your own destiny. But yeah, that's from a selfish perspective as a partner. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ollie. Ryan, I'm going to skip over your question if that's all right. I think we covered a lot of that already in the chat. I know that Connor's responded to you as well. Obviously, you can pick up directly with Ollie after the event, of course. We have got time for a couple more questions. I'm going to come to Christopher Harrison, who's the Insight and Systemic Lead at the Housing Ombudsman.
Yes, thanks for the introduction. I've a question about, obviously I'm interested in complaints more than anything else that's going on here. You mentioned about organizations using AI to summarize complaints and get on. One of the things, and this will probably come up later, one of the things that we're seeing is landlords are seeing AI generated complaints from their residents. And there's all sorts of things that come along with that, but it's going to be interesting trying to watch different AI systems trying to summarize themselves. I'm a little bit worried. The risk there, I think, is there a risk that those complaints will get sort of over summarized or reduced or confused in some way by being produced by one and analyzed by another? And is there anything that landlords can do to sort of mitigate that?
Yeah. So in terms of AI generated complaints, I think one of the interesting parts about that is it's understanding the intent. Is it AI generated just because, crikey, if I can get AI to explain what my problem is, it's far more eloquent and articulate the issue than me having a rant and a rave, right? Or is this intended to really, there aren't complaints. There are disgruntled elements of the population, right? So I think that it's an interesting concept. I think, again, with where we're looking at this phased approach of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of a frontier firm. Phase 1 would be, yes, you're going to get your content summarized, but you have to use your intuition. You have to use you as the human, as the expert in that loop, to understand what's going on. And I think it's absolutely critical that stays. It stays in things that are really useful. There are things that have to happen, and there are processes that have to be followed. Getting there quicker is brilliant, but getting there autonomously for every process, I don't think is the answer. So it's really just making sure that, again, from a bias, from an ethics perspective, but also from a human-led perspective, we're always leading these elements as humans. But if we can if we can reduce the manual effort of some of this stuff, the repeated manual effort of some of the stuff, we absolutely should aim for that. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but I think keeping the expert in the loop is going to be critical for some of these critical processes.
Thanks very much.
We will move on shortly, but I've just got one more question I'm going to ask, which is from Tamsin Kilby-Jones, Chief Product Officer at Wiser. I think it's a really interesting point Tammy's making here. Does automating routine tasks unintentionally increase burnout by staff having to deal with only the most complex, emotional, and stressful cases all day? If humans no longer handle the normal and easy work, in inverted commas, what happens to pattern recognition, judgment, and expertise over time, and does overall risk increase?
Yeah, that's a valid concern. It's a valid concern. We have to be very careful about how much we automate, and how much we're actually saying, okay, really, really critical issues are the only thing that people are going to see. You then will have a skewed view on the content and the approach. I think where we try and mitigate that, or where we should try and mitigate that, is that yes, you're reducing the manual work, and you are trying to keep the expert in the loop. And yes, that will probably mean that you're going to be working far more on the complex cases, and utilizing your human judgment far more, and utilizing the human in you more. But I think if you can look at those complex cases, hopefully if you've got elements of that complex case automated, elements of the thought process automated, it might enable you to do more. One of the scenarios I like to think about is within case management, there is an agent which Microsoft Dynamics customer service is created, which is called the intent agent. Now, this is something that sits kind of with you as you're typing away and answering to a customer, and it actually just monitors your conversation and suggests things that could help in that situation. So rather than it all being on the individual sat there talking, typing or talking away through, you have an agent that's kind of supporting you in the way in which you're having that conversation. You can choose to ignore that, but it may help you in terms of your mental load when you're specifically thinking about a challenging situation where somebody's having a conversation with you, and actually there's an agent there listening out, understanding the intent, understanding the context, and giving you suggestions about how to resolve the certain issue, to suggest things to help, and actually can reduce the burden of maybe some of that heavy lifting, but you're still in control. And I think that's the important part, is some of these agents will enable you to kind of help you in a situation. Now, don't get me wrong, we've been in the situations where you've got two people on the call, you've got your manager listening in, and you've got yourself listening in, and then there's scribbling on a piece of paper to say, oh, just mention this, and you're like, oh yeah, that would be useful, and then you have that conversation. Well, you could utilize an agent to be able to minimize that burden that's all on the human. And there'll be lots of different ways. That's just an example, but there'll be lots of different ways where we should be able to support that heavy load with assistance.
Excellent. Ollie, obviously you guys must work in other sectors as well as social housing. And I think we all agree that social housing is notoriously, and rightly so, risk averse, or at least tries to be anyway. And I think, is there elements that, you work in other sectors that you're seeing that, which housing associations would kind of like reel back with, like, oh, couldn't possibly do anything like that. And one of those things I wanted to mention as well is open claw, and if you're seeing the use of that in other sectors, and if anyone's having to play around with that as well.
Yeah, very interesting. So in other sectors, I think every sector, every organization has an element of governance, compliance, and control. The sectors that Crimson work in are housing, but also local authority, and higher education. So all of those, they really are. Yeah, they are. I think it's all about making sure that you're having the right conversations, and you've got the right governance, and relying on the things that you've done in the past. GDPR has been around for donkey's years now, and ISO 27001 has been around for ages as well. So you've got reference points around how you can govern data, how you can govern security, how organizations have always tried to prevent or inputted data loss prevention policies, right? So the AI is no different. It's just that the access and the availability and the hyperscale of what you can do with AI just means you've got to be far more vigilant in what you're doing. To dovetail into then the conversation around some of the other elements of where AI is being used. So OpenClaw is really interesting, and actually, from a Microsoft perspective, it's very interesting because they have just released M365 Co-work, which is actually starting to touch on some of the things that you're looking to do with tools such as OpenClaw, and actually that Microsoft hired, I think, one of the OpenClaw product owners to actually be a part of how they're actually going to sort of merge some of the productivity that OpenClaw is actually producing. But you see it with Claude Co-work, you see it in M365 Co-work. There are lots of tools and lots of ways in which you can maximize the efficacy of your staff. It always boils down to making sure that you've got the right education, the right communication, and covering all of those boundaries with your staff, and then the transparency with your customers. It was really funny. I can't remember who was saying that where you've got these extra tools and where you're actually looking at different ways in which data is going to be shared. That there's always that responsibility, whether it's an AI that hallucinates, whether it's somebody spitting out sensitive data into a tool that's not supported. Funnily enough, the way in which we did internally, we rolled out M365 Copilot 2 years ago. We did an education piece on when we didn't block ChatGPT. Back to Kieran's point, we haven't blocked a lot of the AI tools that publicly available out there. But as an education piece, when we started to onboard and embed people into M365 Copilot, that was our option to say, okay, audience, this is what we're doing. This is where we're going. Let's start that education piece. Here's some brilliant stuff that you can do with AI in a protected area where you're not going to lose your data. So when you start looking at these use cases or these scenarios where you would traditionally go out to ChatGPT and any of the Anthropic tools that are out there, well, actually no. When it's business data, when it's critical information, when it's stuff that you shouldn't be sharing, you're using the tools inside. We'll protect it for you. But these are your suite of agreed tools, and this is all the different areas that you can play in. But yes, Claude Code, OpenClaw, certainly, because that's really then on device where you've got you're going into the world of slightly more edge AI in that aspect, as well as some of the other additional tools. This is all something that we need to consider because these are all different and new ways of how we're going to work.
Indeed. Yeah, indeed. It's I've started listening to the Times Tech podcast recently, and I've just become obsessed with it. To be honest with you, I'm literally a loyal fan waiting for it to come out at the end of each week. In some of the things they talk about coming out of Silicon Valley, and a dating site for bots is one of them. I think a dating site purely for AI. Yeah, it's scary. Thank you, Ollie. We are going to move on to our next keynote now. So please join me in thanking Ollie for a great presentation and being really comprehensive with his answers there. Right, I'm going to round things up. So please join me in a big thank you to all our three speakers. We first heard from Ollie Sinclair. Oliver is the Chief Technology Officer at Crimson, who are also today's sponsor of the Micro Conference. Ollie explored AI agents in housing, highlighting their potential to automate processes from tenant comms to asset management. He emphasised the importance of data quality, transparency, governance, and maintaining expert oversight. Ollie discussed implementation strategies, addressing concerns about infrastructure dependencies, hallucination risks, and the need for robust testing before deploying customer-facing AI systems. Next, we heard from Oliver Goldring. Oliver is the head of digital service design and comms at Magna Housing. Oliver argued that housing associations have a service design problem, not a tech problem. AI amplifies existing processes, whether good or bad. Before automating, organizations must listen to tenants, redesign broken services, and ensure AI enhances human judgment rather than replacing it. Trust is built through people, not technology alone. Then our final presentation was from Kieran Poynton. Kieran is the Director of Data Analytics at Bromford. Kieran addressed the data strategy paradox, advocating for balancing long-term vision with immediate value delivery. He emphasized relationship building over pure logic, introduced a domain-driven design approach, and outlined BFL's tactical integration strategy. Kieran stressed moving toward decentralized capabilities while maintaining enterprise thinking to drive organizational data maturity. So thank you very much for everyone who attended. We will be opening registrations for our next online micro conference soon. We'll hope to see you there. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday afternoon, everybody.